one. Waiting for it. Here we go. We are in. It's episode number 6 this is at the Catamount Chronicles, our UVM-centered podcast, brought to you by Sobu Stretch, a boutique yoga and meditation studio off Shelburne Road in South Burlington, and by the Strike Zone Baseball Academy in Essex Junction. More about them soon. It's a variation for us on the podcast today. It's somebody that didn't go to UVM, but somebody who broadcasted for UVM back in the early to mid-2000s. It's Dave Koehn, who was the voice of Catamount basketball. Dave, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Brady. I also understand I am the least athletic guest you've had to this point. Is that accurate?
I haven't seen Tom Brennan play hoops lately, but if you are better than him, then you would not be the least athletic at this point.
He's got to get some credit for his early days back in the day. So his resume is a little more stacked than mine is on the athletic process. As long as we don't want to dig too deep into state championships with tennis and those types of things and bore your audience. But anyway, happy to be with you, even if it is just as a lowly broadcaster with you here on here.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. Again, you spent time, 2005 to 2008 up in Burlington, UVM Hoops. You did Lake Monster games. Now you're the voice of University of Virginia basketball and football. You've done that now since 2008. Does it really seem like almost 15 years ago that you were in Burlington?
It seems like 15 years ago that I was broadcasting football a year ago. The way things were going, so that makes it feel like maybe 30 years ago I was in Vermont. But yeah, no, it's been some time, and in some ways it does feel like it was a long time ago, and others it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. Last year we got a chance to get back up to Vermont for the first time since I'd left, which was really fun in the summer to see a lot of the people that we spent some time with back there, and it was really cool to reconnect with some of those faces that I got to know. Walt Bauman, who was my longtime broadcast partner for basketball. I say long time. I was there for 3 years. So I guess he was a longtime broadcaster. And so, one of our dear friends and kind of almost like a surrogate grandfather for us, and took us in his house. So he and his wife, Kathy, it was great to see them amongst others. So, but yeah, it's been some time, and happy to say I still got a full head of hair since I left. But and the gray hasn't started too much. It's coming in a little bit, but no, it was a great time, and it does seem like it's been a minute.
As somebody who is in broadcasting, in content creation, and works for a D1 athletic department, how many Zoom calls have you been on in the last 6 months?
Oh man, a lot. But not nearly as many as the administrators. The administrators are the ones who basically live on these things. It's just we did a lot of stuff in terms of interviews and stuff that we would post to social media a lot during May and June. And then I was able to sneak away for about 5 weeks to go on vacation back to my home in Colorado, where I'm from. But I've been a lot. And, in fact, I even did some. It was pretty surreal. I was doing one of these. We had one of these things set up with a former Virginia player, Malcolm Brogdon, and some donors that I was sitting in this mountain cabin we were sitting at. We had internet. Not great internet, but it was totally good enough for that night. I'm looking at this incredible view of the mountains. I got Malcolm Brogdon on, and we've got 2,000 donors on watching everything. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, what a world we're living in here right now. I mean, it's just been so surreal on so many levels with everything that's transpired. And and that means a lot of Zoom. So you get used to that. And, it's even crazy as we're thinking about all these scenarios we're, of course, in the Atlantic Coast Conference, still planning on playing football, at least at the time that you and I are talking here. I have to that because everything changes so quickly. But, we're trying to figure out ways to incorporate Zoom into how we do our post-game interviews now, because we're not able to be down there. I mean, it's just all these crazy contingencies that you got to come up with this technology that we're also relying on now. But it's been different.
What have you taught yourself during quarantine, during time off or time away, et cetera? Because even this is new to me. Doing the video chat, I've got a ticker here with the sponsor information behind it. I got a logo up top. This is new to me, and I'm happy that I've learned this. But what have you taught yourself over the last couple months?
Probably not enough. I've gotten really good on my mountain bike. I'll say that. That's sort of been my oxygen through this whole thing from a exercise perspective. But no, I mean, you just have to adjust. And one thing I'll also say is, if this was going to happen, man, I'll tell you, I think about if this had happened back in, let's say, maybe even early 2000s, or how about even the late 80s, before there was internet.
Yeah.
I mean, we're able to do a lot from your house. It's kind of amazing to me how much I've been able to pick up. With all my stuff stored on a cloud, everything that was in my studio, I can now just pull up right on my laptop, and I have access to all the sound files, and I can edit. I can do all these different things right here at my house. So it's pretty amazing what I've been able to do. But I was fortunate that this all hit in my so-called off season because
Yeah.
it was at the end of basketball season where this all went down. So yeah, we missed the NCAA tournament, which was a bummer given where Virginia was going at that time. They'd won 11 straight games, and you felt like you wanted a chance to defend your national title, and that would have been fun. But at the same time, we had gotten through a whole football season and almost an entire basketball season. So fortunate from that end. But so it was my off season. Now we're cranking up in season, and I'll probably be able to answer that question better here in about a month with some new things that I'm going to learn if in fact we're able to play football here over the course of the next couple months. So we're going to have, we're going to be doing some of those Remy broadcasts, those types of things potentially for the road. We're all these different things. And so, yeah, it's going to be different. I might have to learn how to make crowd noise by
Yeah.
myself here because I don't know what that's going to sound like, but a lot of unknowns moving into the fall.
It seems like about 110 years ago that UVM basketball played Virginia basketball this most recent season. Anthony Lamb scored like 30 points in that game, and UVM. I hesitate to say they almost won, but they were in it very, very late.
Absolutely.
What was that experience like for you seeing UVM come to Charlottesville?
Well, I had some guys on my broadcast team that were questioning my allegiance
Yeah.
because you do root for people you like, and that's not to say, look, my heart's with Virginia now. I've been here for, as we talked about, 12 years, my 13th year going in now. So I've spent a lot of my life here, and I know these guys and have a ton of respect and love the people I get to work with here at UVA. But yeah, guys like John Becker and all of his crew, and you got the history and the roots there, and you know that UVM does it the right way, and so that's fun to see those guys, and I had a sense that game was going to be a challenge. I knew it was just talking to Coach Becker. I got to see him when I was out there last summer too, and he was speaking very confidently about that group of players, and I knew that Virginia was going to have some holes to fill, and particularly early on in the year, and that Virginia team grew up as the season went, but. Yeah, that was pretty wild. I absolutely felt like Vermont had an opportunity to win that game, and they did. I mean, boy, I'll tell you the performance we saw, from Lamb, all those guys. I mean, they played their hearts out, and it was it was a fun game to call.
When you tell people you're a Virginia broadcaster, do you get asked more quickly about the 16 seed beating the 1 or the national championship you got to call the year after? What question comes first at the holiday party?
Well, I think fortunately it's the more recent one, which was the national championship. In so many ways, the fact that Virginia won that title, it almost makes this loss to the 16 feel more like a badge of honor because it's
Yeah.
like you went through that and you found a way to reach the apex after all that. And that it just made it that much of a richer story to tell. I mean, you know Brady as well as I do. I mean, those are the kind of stories you dream about. I mean, those
Yeah.
redemption stories. I mean, there's nothing better. I mean, that's why we do this is sports broadcasters, the opportunity to tell those types of stories of somebody picking themselves up off the ground, and it's that human spirit on display. Can you withstand adversity, and how do you handle it? And yeah, that was pretty amazing. But the last 3 years, my partner on the broadcast the last 3 years is a former Virginia player by the name of Jimmy Miller. He played with Ralph Sampson back in the
Oh,
days.
wow.
He was the Eastern Regional MVP. Anyway, since he's joined in those 3 years, I don't think there have been three more historic seasons in
Hmm.
college basketball because his first year, Virginia loses to a 16 seed for the first time a one seed ever loses to a 16. And then the next year, Virginia wins its first ever national championship. And then the following year, we can't even finish because of the first global pandemic since 1918. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been a wild 3 years that we've been a part of. And we had the chance to watch that all play out. I say the chance because in some ways it was like that being at the ACC tournament when COVID-19 really hit that day, March 11th. You never forget it. It was either the 11th or the 12th. Now I'm forgetting, but it was, we were watching a game the night before Virginia was supposed to play, and we were sitting there with amongst reporters, and all this buzz was circulating around the gymnasium in Greensboro when fans were there, and
Yeah.
it felt like you were hearing about Pearl Harbor, and you were kind of on the front lines because you were in the midst of it at a major sporting event.
For the record, I have no problem when team announcers on home TV or home radio, I have no problem when they're a little bit homerish. Like, you work for the team, you're there all the time, you know the guys. I have no problem with you rooting for the team. When you are calling a game where a 16 is going to beat a 1, but you're the one that's losing, how do you handle that? Are you recognizing you're calling history, so you're ramped up a little bit? Are you dejected because it's your team that is losing? How does that dynamic factor in when history is happening?
Yeah, I mean, you're a human being on both sides of that equation. In a lot of ways, and I think it's when you're winning and losing. And I did experience both sides of it during that 2 year stretch. And I'll start with your question about a 16 beating a 1. You, in this case, you know this too, Brady, when you work with guys that you like, and Tony Bennett is as good as they get. The way he
Yep.
goes about things, he is an extremely good human being, and you want good things for people like that do things the right way. And so, there is a human element to this. It's not just broadcasting. I mean, you realize that this is something that's going to mar someone's reputation potentially for the rest of their lives, and you also recognize from a selfish perspective what this means for what you're a part of. You recognize that business could suffer because of this. If,
Yeah.
if you're the laughing stock for an entire, I mean, you don't necessarily think that you're going to come right back and win the national title the next year. That's not the thing that's going through your mind. It's the fact that you're going to be the butt of jokes for the next 50 to 100 years. You'll be a trivia
Mm.
question. And so, yeah, and you hate it for the guys. So yeah, your heart bleeds through this, and there's a feeling, almost a sick feeling in your stomach while it's going through. But you have to kind of remind yourself that those are those moments you almost. I will put a dollar bill in front of me and remind myself that I am getting paid to do this. This is my job. I have to be a professional through this. And in some ways, I remember almost feeling a bit in the post game show like a therapist for Virginia's fan base as
Yeah.
we went through this and got very philosophical about what this meant and how you handle it, the perspective check as you go through something like that. But it was something I'll never forget. And then the next year to have the same thing playing out again, which was unbelievable. In the first year, Virginia had its biggest deficit of the whole season against a 16 seed again in the NCAA tournament. So you're sitting here thinking, is lightning really about to strike
Hmm.
twice? In some sense, the fact that I'd been through it the year before, I felt more equipped to be able to handle it. But then on the other side of that coin is that whole idea of controlling your emotions as a broadcaster when things are really going well, as in that wild run through the Elite Eight, Final Four, and National Championship game when things were so crazy. Virginia had been in so many tense games, though, having called that game in the first round when Virginia won it ultimately. I felt like I was even more prepared to handle those tense moments when things are going well. It's a balancing act. And anyone who
Yeah.
tells you as a broadcaster you don't have emotions vested in this thing is lying, especially to your point when you're the voice of the team and you know who your audience is and you've known these people and you have relationships with these people. So, yeah, you do bleed it. When things go bad, and you celebrate it when things go well. That's one of the things I love about what we do, being a home broadcaster, because at some level you get to maintain some degree of being a fan still, and that's why we do this. As I said earlier, I mean, it's about those great stories you get to tell, and getting to have a vested interest in it. I love that part of the job.
Catamount Chronicles, Episode 6 with Dave Koehn. You see it being brought to you by, on the bottom of your screen, Strike Zone Baseball Academy in Essex Junction off Susie Wilson Road. You get a free evaluation of your baseball skills by mentioning this podcast. So they've got all the latest in the fancy technology, hit tracks, Rapsodo, pitchers, hitters. All of you can benefit from it. You can rent out the cages for birthday parties. You can do camps there, lessons, hitting your cage with your mom or dad, whatever you want to do. They've got it for you. So free evaluation of your baseball skills by mentioning this podcast. I want to take you back to early in your career when you came to UVM. What brought you to UVM? Was it something about the university specifically? Did you just want a job young in your career? What brought you here in the first place?
It was my boy Tom Brennan. No,
Yeah.
in fact, he was one of the first people I got to meet when I was there. I'll never forget that. I think I may have shared this with you on your show earlier, but I had dinner with Steve Cormier and Tom Brennan
Yeah.
this night in Charlottesville, and we went to Juniors. And I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't think Juniors is there anymore. is it?
Junior's Pizza.
It was
That Junior.
Italian. It was the restaurant where you got pasta back and everything, all that.
Okay, so that has a new name, but they brought it. Well, actually, it closed and they brought it back with the same name, so it's still around.
Oh, that's great. Well, that gives me some feeling of levity going through this interview because I think when we were back there, it wasn't there, and I was pretty bummed.
Yes.
So
it opens back.
Yeah, that's great. So anyway, that was my first meal in Charlottesville. But no, what brought me there though to your original question, yeah, it was certainly the job, but as I mentioned, I'm a Colorado guy.
Yeah.
And I love the outdoors. I love to ski. I love to mountain bike, and I had always had an affinity for Vermont, believe it or not. And so when I saw that job presented, I'm a big lifestyle guy too, and I thought, man, how cool would this be to get this job and be able to live up there, and also further your broadcast career too, because and the team was coming off of that amazing win against Syracuse the year before, so they were right on the national radar from that shot heard around the world from TJ Sorrentine back the year before. So I was really excited for a lot of reasons to come up to Vermont, and a lot of it was the basketball success that they'd had, but also the town. I mean, I'm kind of I lean crunchy, so Vermont lends itself to my personality, my wife's personality. We loved our time up there, and we to this day really do miss it still.
Well, TJ Sorrentine is going to join us in episode number 8 of the podcast. So this is 6. TJ is going to join us in episode 8. The guy who was on with us in episode 2 is Mike Trimboli, who didn't get to play in an NCAA tournament, but he was there when you were there. Over 2,000 points in his career. How good was Mike Trimboli, since I never saw him play in person, other than when he scored 50 on me in the Burlington Y League?
Yeah, Mike was hard-nosed, man. He was tough. And I'm sure still is. In fact, I got a chance to have dinner with him and Chad Polovich, who was on that team as well. Chad is, and I think he's still in Charlottesville, but Chad's living in Charlottesville now. Mike was coming down through for some business, and this was, I think, last summer that we all got a chance to get together and grab a bite to eat. So that was pretty cool to see those guys all these years later. But no, Mike was great. He was just not afraid from the day he started. That's one of those things, you just can't coach a guy into, but Trimboli was from the day he set foot on campus as a freshman, he was asked to carry a lot of the load right when he got there, and he did. And those teams were very good. I hated that he didn't get to play in the NCAA tournament.
I know
that was the thing, and I hated it for him. I selfishly, I hated it for me. I wanted to call a game in the NCAA tournament, and you were so close so many times, and that makes it so much harder. But they won a lot of basketball games through those years, and Mike was a big part of why. Just a tough, hard-nosed kid.
So how hard was it to leave? Obviously, you get a job Division I, ACC. I understand you have to leave, but how hard was it to leave by a place that you said, by all accounts, you really liked?
Yeah, it was hard, but at the same time, to your point, this was a major professional opportunity for me, and in a pretty cool town too. So like that was the beautiful part of it. Charlottesville in a lot of ways is very similar to Burlington. I mentioned to you before we came on the air here that summertime's not my favorite up here. July and August I could do without, but the rest of the year I love it. And so there's a lot of cool things around here, and there are some cool outdoors things. I get to mountain bike a ton around here too, which is great. So that's nice. I discovered a lot of that part around here, but it's a great town. It's got some great culture. And so, from that end, I was moving quite a bit at that time in my career. So I had been in Vermont for 3 years, and I think the longest I'd stayed somewhere to that point was maybe 3 years. So I was sort of used to kind of picking up and going. And as a matter of fact, we had a couple friends that were moving around that time too. So whenever you have friends that are also moving, you're like, okay, well, maybe it's time.
Yeah.
That said, you also know, and you kind of cherish those places that you live over the course of your life where you feel like that was a pretty special situation, and you just kind of appreciate it for what it is. But it was hard for my wife too. I know, because she had a job she liked, and that was tricky too. And of course, for me, it was professionally a no-brainer. She had to reinvent herself down here, and she did a nice job of that. But so there, it was challenging because it is a place that we both like to live.
You also got to call Lake Monster games. You did that for a couple of years when you were up here too. What was it like for you calling pro baseball in addition to calling D1 hoops? Because baseball is not something that you're doing now.
Yeah, no, that was, I've said it many times. I think some of the best stories I have told if you wanted me to tell you some of the wildest, just like crazy stories, minor league baseball
Yeah.
is the curator of crazy stories, because there are so many wild things that happened. I mean, it really. I mean, I don't know how there were that many in such a short period of time, because I was really doing baseball. I'm trying to think back. I guess it would have been basically June, July, August. So
Yep.
3 months out of the year. And at that time, I wasn't even doing all the games. You know, I was sharing some of those duties. George Como was doing some of the games too,
Yep.
and we shared some of those duties. But we did. I think I did most of them, but it wasn't all of them. So, but point being, I packed a lot in. There were a lot
Yeah.
of stories. The stories per capita were very high during those times, covering the Lake Monsters, and I love doing games at Centennial Field. It just had that, again, it's that uniqueness that Burlington has. It's one of a kind. I mean, you're broadcasting baseball games. You were doing these games. Yeah, it was dilapidated in a lot of areas, and but it had that history. It'd been there forever, and I don't know. There's just a certain element of charm that Burlington has in so many places, and I think Centennial Field was one of those kind of unique little charms and gems that in that town.
What's the difference like for you calling basketball and calling football at Virginia? Basketball, obviously, more jam packed, where you could play 2, 3 games in a week, depending, or have a weekend tournament or whatever. Football, 1 game per week, but it's in the ACC. The team not quite as good as the basketball program is. What's it like for you, the dynamic doing basketball and football at Virginia?
Yeah, and don't kid yourself. Basketball wasn't very good when I got here either.
Yeah.
Basketball was struggling, and really so was football, until recently. Both of them, last year I got to call a national title and an Orange Bowl all in one year, so that was kind of like the charmed year. I mean, we went out with a bang into COVID
Yeah.
here, but the biggest, to me, I love them both. I really do, and I grew up as a major football fan. I mean, I think is a spectator, that was my favorite, and probably still is. I grew up, as I mentioned, in Colorado. Those were during the John Elway days, so my whole youth growing up, he was sort of the icon I watched, and that was, I mean, that was riveting. You talk about the whole idea of putting the human spirit, on display, walking the high wire. It was always drama and overcoming, adversity, those types of things. But it was it was really fun to watch that through those years. I'm sorry, my dog's trying to climb underneath me as we do this here. This is the joy of living at home. But anyway, yeah, it was, but calling football, I've always loved the fact that the buildup, the
Yeah.
hype every week. There's just this buildup that goes into that one game, and it means so much. And then it kind of all culminates on Saturday or whatever day your game is in the NFL Sunday. But I love that part of it. Now basketball, you love for a different. It's almost like I say, it's like judging between your kids. You love them all for different reasons.
Yep.
I love the rhythm of basketball. I love the description of basketball. I like the high-paced nature of basketball. So they're both so fun, and the chance to call both of them is really. I mean, those are my two favorites. You mentioned I got to call baseball. Baseball's got its own art for sure, but maybe I'm too ADD, at least as a spectator, when it comes to baseball. Things take too long for me. I don't know. I struggle with anything that takes longer, and you make the case football takes a long time too. But at least it's just moving, so it just keeps me occupied. But so much going on at once too in football that you got to describe as a broadcaster. But you don't also get that opportunity to storytell as much in baseball. So I guess they all have their charm, and I guess I just like broadcasting. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, sports calling games is one of my favorite things to do, and hopefully get back to doing it sooner rather than later here.
Now, are you into UVA baseball at all? Like, are you in the know in the program at all, even though you don't do the games?
Not as much anymore. No, I did do the games for the first 3 or 4 years. I got to do 2 College World Series in that time, but since I've stopped doing them, I really haven't been. I'm not nearly as in the know as I once was.
Okay, well, somewhere in my closet, I've got a University of Virginia baseball shirt because Brandon Cogswell, the former second baseman of the team a couple of years ago, he was my high school teamate.
Is that right? Yeah,
So
Brandon. Yeah, that's great.
he was a freshman when I was a senior. So he was on varsity from the beginning, and he hit leadoff for us, and he was great. But yeah, so there was a period of time where I was into UVA baseball, and they were in the College World Series against Vanderbilt in the championship series a couple of years ago, and Cogswell was arguably the best player on the team, but I was deep into it for that 1 year.
Yeah, that was a good year to be into it.
So, a broadcasting question you probably get all the time: what's the, outside of your own, best venue to call basketball at? Cameron or the Dean Dome?
Well, you're saying between those two, because I'll take Allen Fieldhouse over both those places.
Well, that's right. You went to Kansas, didn't you?
Yep, I'll take Allen Fieldhouse over both those places. For me, Cameron's grown on me. But Cameron, when I first started doing games there, when I first got into the ACC, you'd heard all about Cameron Indoor. I remember walking in and being like, "This is Cameron."
Yeah.
It's just it's a dilapidated high school gym more than it's a glorified high school gym. But they pack it in some of the games that we've played there the last couple of years, and that's the other thing. When Virginia was struggling, it wasn't nearly as electric in that place. So it was kind of like a check the box game for the Cameron Crazies. Now it's one of the games they line up for because it's two high powered ACC teams amongst the top 10 in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and we've seen some battles there. So I'd say Cameron has maybe passed the Dean Dome, but I really do enjoy doing games at the Dean Dome. Some people will tell you it's a little sterile, and kind of one of those cookie cutter type buildings that was put up in I guess it would have been the mid to late 80s, but it's a place that I can feel the history, and we've been in some big games there too. I had Michael Jordan sitting behind me about 2 rows a year ago when we were there. We had all the stars coming out to watch. It was the year of Virginia lost to the 16. LeBron James was courtside. I mean, it was all sorts of crazy celebrities coming in to watch those games, which was pretty neat.
What about in football? What's the best ACC venue outside of your own to call games? I grew up in the South for a little bit, and I gravitated towards Florida State. As a 9-year-old, I was a total front runner, but Warwick Dunn, Peter Warwick, those guys, I really liked Florida State. And so I've always just thought that probably Doak was a really great place to be at in terms of the environment. Am I wrong in that?
No, it's cool. Yeah, Doak's very cool. But I'll tell you, I think my favorite place, and I've only won one game there, although I'm going back to an empty stadium, which would be very strange, or at least a mostly empty stadium, Clemson. Clemson's stadium is outstanding, and the tailgating scene would just go for miles and miles and miles, and it's built into the ground, so it's very steep and it goes up. I loved calling that game there. I only did one though because of the unbalanced schedule and the nature of the ACC. In 12 years, I did only one game there, and we were slated to go there again this year. And even when they redid the schedule, we're still slated to go there. We'll play there on I guess it would be September 26th, I think. So it's a drivable distance. It's a long distance. That's basically how we're determining what games we go to. I think we're going to be able to do the 5 road games, but the Florida I think we're going to end up having to do from our own home stadium off monitors as broadcasters are doing these days. So fortunately, those won't be till later in the year, but I will be making that trip to Clemson, and I suspect it's going to be a markedly different feel in that stadium this time from the last time I was there.
Catamount Chronicles, episode number 6 with Dave Koehn, brought to you by, as you see on the bottom of your screen, Sobu Stretch, boutique yoga and meditation studio just off Shelburne Road in South Burlington. Dave, they do virtual classes, so I know you're a lifestyle guy, so you can hop on, use the promo code Brady5 and get $5 off there. If you're not a yoga guy, I recommend becoming a yoga guy.
I need to be a yoga guy. I'm not, and I've got the flexibility of a 95-year-old. So I could definitely use some yoga. Maybe I'll have to check that out too.
Well, again, virtual classes for you, $5 off, promo code Brady5. Dave Koehn, former voice, UVM Athletics, UVM Basketball, did the Lake Monsters as well, spent 3 years here up in Burlington. Now the voice of the champion Virginia Cavaliers basketball program. So, Dave, thank you so much, man. We appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be on. Hopefully we're not saying Virginia defending champions for 5 years before we get playing again here. But, we'll take what we can get. It's been fun. Thanks for having me on, Brady. Keep up the good work, man.